So yes, thank you. Thank you for all giving up your time to be here this evening. It's I get to talk about one of my favorite things in the world, and I get to learn from you too. I always learn something every single time I talk about shadow. So thank you in advance for that. And straight off the bat, somebody's already put a comment in chat with regards to accessibility. So to help you kind of have a sense of how tonight's going to pan out. And if you do have any accessibility needs in relation to that, do let Izzy know. I do have quite a quiet voice, so I've heard the message to speak up. It will likely dip from time to time. I can only apologise. I will try my very best. And when we come out of slide screen mode, feel free to wave at me if you want me to speak up, but I will try my best. For everybody else, just to let you know that there is going to be one breakout, and there will be some use of the chat, kind of sharing some things in the chat at one point this evening. So if you have any needs in relation to that will kind of get in the way of you participating, do just let us know. We'll try and accommodate accordingly. Pen and paper handy for a couple of the activities I'm going to take you through. But I am going to be sending copies of the slides out, so please don't feel you have to kind of take copious notes, because you will be getting a copy of the slides as well as a few other bits and pieces after this call. Also getting the certificate of attendance if you stay to the end. I have to remember to tell you that. And I think that's it. So I know I'm going to miss you when I put the slides on. It's so much nicer to do this in kind of relationally with faces. However, we have got a lot to get through, so I'm going to pop the slides up just shortly. But really what I wanted to say is that shadow work has been totally transformational for me as a human, certainly as a partner, as a friend. But in terms of my practice, it's been tangibly transformational in the way that I promote my work, in the way that I price my work, and in the quality of my presence and how I show up when I'm in relationship with people. I can point to specific kind of moments of insight, little gems and pearls that I've retrieved from my shadow over the last few years that have made a fundamental difference to how I work. I've discovered things like, it's funny, I can still notice the cringe as I say it. This one's still integrating. I'm not quite there yet. But I am greedy. Still makes me cringe slightly, and you'll hear me talk a bit about the interoceptive quality of how we commune with the unconscious. And a cringe or a wince is a great way to know that you're close to shadow material. So I am greedy was quite painful, but opened up generosity. Discovering my disappointment has been profound. And has pointed me to a greater degree of satisfaction and fulfillment in my work. I was really surprised to discover that I'm a lone wolf, and getting to know that part of myself has supported me in being more vulnerable and opening up and asking for help from others. And I now have an incredible support network around me as I continue to take more risks in my work. Lazy was a good one. My other half was lazy. My God, I got caught in the projection of that one for a long time. And then when I eventually brought that one home, I started to discover the power of rest and recuperation. And I've taken more holidays in the last 2 years than the previous 12 years of self-employment. I could go on, but it's just to give you a flavour. This isn't kind of good theoretically. It's really had an impact on the way that I show up and live my life every day. So that fuels my enthusiasm for the topic, and I hope that that's infectious for you this evening as well. And good news, just play, is that it's not just true for me. So I've had the privilege of working with over 20 coaches now on a more kind of immersive deep dive into using the 4 Ps of shadow work. And the feedback from other people has been incredibly humbling for me. And it points too, something that I hope you are able to take away from the talk this evening, which is that shadow is an energy. It's a source and a resource of great energy. And if we're not engaging with it, it will attempt to have an impact on us anyway. But once we come into relationship with it, things can transform for other people in really powerful ways too. And as I look at this list of kind of testimonials from people and what's different for them as a consequence of integrating shadow into their coaching practice, they'll see that there's courage, intuition, able to take risks, a greater sense of trust has somehow expanded the ground from which they're working. Things get quieter, so there's more space. That beautiful kind of presence and use of self becomes decluttered when we learn how to work with the signals that might be getting in the way. So I'm delighted to kind of share this with you too, to hopefully inspire you to consider working with the four, well, it says promoted as the 4 P's of shadow work, and that's what we're here to talk about this evening. But the eagle-eyed will notice that there's a 5th that's just kind of crept its way in. So the 4 P's of shadow work are essentially, if the shadow is our unconscious, how on earth do we commune with the unconscious? We need some tips and tricks, some techniques in order to bridge the gap from what's unconscious to what's conscious. But I call it learning the language of shadow. And for me, if you've ever learned another language, you usually start with a kind of, you learn a few nouns and then maybe a few verbs, and you chuck together some rudimentary sentences, in a bid to start communicating in this new language. When it comes to shadow, that's what projection and polarity represent. They're like the nouns and verbs of learning a new language. They're a way for you to get quite granular and build up your own vocabulary of what is it that's coming through. But it's also a way to go fishing. So we can get quite hands-on. Working with projection and polarities, I think, also satisfies the left brain, that likes a bit of clarity and wants skin in the game. It doesn't want it to be too airy-fairy, wishy-washy. It's like, what are we doing here? And the way we work with projections and polarities can answer that question. There's some kind of structured techniques and things that you can do, so we can kind of get left brain involved in the process as well. And then the other 2 P's are then parts and patterns. And these are a very different experience of working with shadow. And to continue the kind of analogy of learning a language, when we get more fluent, once we've got the vocab, we can start to have conversations with people in a way that is more focused on the relationship. We can express ourselves more clearly. We can be understood and understand others. This is what parts and patterns do. They're a way for us to kind of squint and get into the poetry of communing with all that is, that's more than us. So we use our projection and polarity to build our vocab, but then parts and patterns is how we can kind of really come into relationship with shadow. And as coaches, this is great anyway, but then as coaches, to do this, the real value in doing this is because it really positively impacts the quality of presence. So when we're sitting in front of another person, it's a relational activity. And when we're in relation to others, there is so much that can pull us out of presence at any given time. Some of that we might know about. There may be interruptions in the space. We might have tech issues. They may have an Amazon delivery. My gosh, that happens all the time. But then there can be other things that take us out of presence, kind of triggers from the unconscious. And if we're not aware of how to kind of make them conscious, we could just put it down to a bad session, or I was just a bit off, or I don't know what it is about them. And so using the 4Ps is a way for us to get super curious about all and anything and everything that happens in a coaching session so that we can continually deepen the quality of presence that we offer to our clients. As a Brucey bonus, I'm going to give you 2 more Ps. I've already mentioned this. As coaches, you know, the bulk of what we do, the passion for the work is in the relationship when we're working with somebody, either one-to-one or in a team coaching scenario. But for most of us, that's not all that's needed. You know, if we're working on a self-employed basis, actually, we've still got those challenges of how to promote, market, price our work. And shadow work can really help get under the skin of what's stopping and blocking and holding us back in those areas too. You know, why does all of this matter? So just to make the case a little more, I just think, you know, sometimes we don't stop and think about just how much we are doing in a coaching situation. It's a classic kind of swan thing, isn't it? That we're being asked to deliver on kind of certain core competencies, and everything that we're doing is either, you know, for or with the client. But there's a lot going on. Listening actively to them, but also to our own system. You know, we need to know what our baseline is so that if something shifts from baseline, that curiosity of, well, is that mine? Is there something going on for me? Is it theirs? Am I picking up on something in their system? Is it something in the dynamic between us? Is it something I share? Is it something I don't share? I hold back for later. There's all of that kind of neuroceptive, unconscious signaling going on that somebody's reading our face to know whether or not there's safety and trust in the relationship between us. So there's an awful lot at play. And if we're only ever reflecting on what we're conscious of, kind of classic Johari window, we're limiting ourselves. So unconscious for me, I think of this woman walking across the Grand Canyon. She's got the right tool for the job. And for me as a coach, understanding the unconscious and the impact that it's having on us is like having the correct tool for the job. It sharpens our reflections. It gives us additional data sources. And for me, it's transformed the way that I show up in supervision. I arrive into supervision now going, there's a thing. What's this? And we can kind of get to the heart of things much more quickly. So that for me is just a taste of why I think understanding shadow, building it into our reflective toolkit is so important for us as coaches. It should be clear by now, but let me make it super clear just in case it isn't. This isn't about a set of techniques for you to do at the client. It's not that way round. This is about self as instrument. It's about saying, let me get more and more and more curious about myself. And then that is my offer to the client. Us first, client second. Okay, so before we look at a definition of shadow, and I must have used the word 1,000 times when we need to have a shared understanding of what that word actually is. But I just wanted to drop this in. I love this quote. And when I read it back and was looking at it through the lens of us as coaches, it struck me that there's an invitation here to meet the shadow with qualities like imagination, curiosity, instinct, humility, and trust. And as I looked at those, I thought, well, gosh, aren't they the qualities that make up our coaching stance? You know, we come into a coaching relationship, open and receptive to explore the other person's world. We bring our imagination and our curiosity, our instinct, humility, and trust. So if we're already skilled at using those qualities, then I thought, well, look, you're pretty set up for bringing those same qualities to dance with shadow. And I guess I wanted to drop that in at that point. And I wonder if any of you are a little surprised maybe by the tone with which I'm talking about shadow. Maybe you've picked up on the fact that there's some warmth or some affection for shadow. Here it is as a resource, something that can positively transform in the way that I've described. And I wonder when you saw the talk advertised, whether that chimed with the version of shadow that you had in your head. And I wonder if you think about that now, think about, okay, what do I understand shadow to be? You just take a second to think about kind of words or images that come to mind for you. Shadow, somebody's shadow. And I think for many people, well, they go, well, it's shadowy, so it's a bit dark and it's a bit scary, and it's somewhere that we don't want to go. Or maybe it's, the stuff that I don't want anybody to see, so it's the murky stuff. Well, there's a reason it's in the shadow. I don't want to go there. I don't want to look at it. So I wonder if that's kind of a perception or an understanding of shadow that you might currently have. Yeah. But if we think about how our shadows are formed, a great place to start is babies, looking at babies. And they're born and they come out, as we all did when we were first born, and we're utterly obnoxious. We're self-centered, we're demanding, we're grasping, we scream, we poop our pants, we're disgusting. And we have the potentiality for all of that in a really innate and available way. We're not limited in the way that we express ourselves when we are first born. We can move with freedom and grace across the full field of what it is to be a human. And then as we start to grow, a necessary process of socialization occurs, and we start to learn that in this family, we don't do that. In this gender, oh, no, not like that. Boys don't do that. Girls certainly don't. And on it goes. We go to school. Maybe we're really proud of a very fancy clip that we put in our hair, and then everybody laughs at us and they point. And we suffer that humiliation of not fitting in. So that socialization process can come with teeth. And it means that we learn this set of qualities and attributes are favoured and appreciated. I'll keep these. I will frame a personality and an identity around those. But these other things, I'm not going to keep those because it doesn't necessarily feel nice when I show those. They might get shouted at. They might get shamed. They might get humiliated. And so off they go. They get jettisoned as we go through this process of maturing. They have to go somewhere, but where they go is the unconscious, which means that over time we forget to remember that those parts were actually ever part of our personality, our scope or our range in the first place. And we need the most, particularly as we set out in life, as we get through school and then head out into the world, and we get jobs and we form relationships, and we need to lead with a cohesive sense of self. That's what the ego is brilliant for. So the ego says, yes, this set of qualities represent identified personas that I'm happy for the world to see. But then there's all the rest of the stuff. Oops. And it waits. And it waits. But I've talked about the shadow being an energetic field. And as we get older, that energetic force field wants to be integrated. It says, fine, fair enough. You've led with all of that stuff. You've created a life for yourself. But then what about me? I'm here too. This happens because we're biological beings, and, the homeostatic principle of balance applies to us just as it does to all other things in nature. So there's an imperative for us to come into balance. So it will come looking for you. And you may well already have had an experience of this happening. If the mask has ever fallen, if you've ever done so, if you ever found yourself in a position where you say, oh, don't know what came over me. That's not like me at all. I was such a calm person, and maybe you flipped your lid at somebody. That's just not like me at all. That might be an example. A little shadow hijack in the moment, a surge of energy from the shadow. The mask drops, and there you are. And it's so shocking to ego that we tend to then double down. We fling it back into the shadow, and we just turn the dial up on whatever it is that we're more comfortable with people seeing. Give you an example. I haven't entirely unreasonable and as yet understood intolerance for dithering. I would come close to killing in supermarkets if people are dithering in front of me. And the mask can drop sometimes, and my teeth can come out. And it shocks the hell out of me because nobody's supposed to see that. The interior is made exterior. And it can be so shocking that I find myself at the checkout going, no, you go before me, please. I'll pay for your shopping, and overcompensating with nice, because the shock of one of those shadow takeovers can be so alarming. So if we don't do the work to come into relationship with it, it's coming knocking anyway. And if it's true in life, it's true in the coaching room. One of those judgments that flashes out of your mind. Ugh, get on with it. A kind of crybaby. Boring. An unwelcome, unbidden thought that maybe just flies across your mind, and you'd really rather not engage with it so you can pretend you didn't hear it. But there's such value and wisdom in catching them and working with them and integrating them. And then it takes the heat out of those takeovers. So that's how shadow is formed, and that's where we all are, caught in a dance. It's here, it's present, you can't see it, but you may well have felt it. And if we think about it, there's an awful lot to be integrated. Our brains love certainty. They reduce things down to probability and what's known. There's only so much our brains can process at any given moment in time, but it doesn't mean all the other stuff isn't there. So at any given time, this is what you identify with. But look at this life's work of all the other stuff that you're being invited to integrate. And if you think about it in this way, do you not just find that quite thrilling? We're in this line of work because, at some level we champion growth. That's what we're here for, to support others in saying more, please. More peace, more satisfaction, more joy, more self-awareness, more self-compassion, whatever it is. More courage. All of that more. Look, It's just a huge playing ground. And if we're doing it for ourselves, our clients will pick up on it. They feel it too. Okay, so let's move to getting into the nitty-gritty with our first P, which is projection. So again, we invite you to just take a moment to think, what's your definition, I wonder, of projection? Maybe one of those words that we think we know, it's kind of bandied about. Will do. What do you think it means? It's that. It's absolutely that. And the thing that I would add is that, yeah, it's kind of it's unresolved in me, you know, and I'm flinging it onto somebody else. Absolutely that. The key thing is it's an unconscious behavior. So we don't know we're doing it, but by God, we might know when we're doing it. So it's not necessarily something we choose to do. But it feels really kind of juicy when we're doing it. There's something incredibly satisfying that there's this thing, it's so distasteful to me. It's so distasteful to me that I'm not even identifying it as part of me. For me to experience it, therefore, I have to fling it out onto you so that I can look at it all over you. And then I can enjoy, back to the kind of ego loving certainty, I can be really certain that you're so awful. And my God, that's a satisfying place to be. We get to be really judgmental, really self-righteous, and so above it. You know, I'm so much better than you are. Look at you. Look at you, so lazy. I, on the other hand, I'm always, so productive. So you get a sense of how satisfying, tasty, and juicy projection is. And I say that because it can be hard to give it up. But it's Debbie Ford, I think, in her book, who says that whenever we're pointing the finger at somebody else, we should remember that there are 3 fingers that are pointing back at ourselves. So the projection is always our own. Okay. And we can feel, because it's unconscious, we can think that it's a kind of a reactive thing. You know, and why do I always get the boss who? Or why do I always get the boyfriend who? We could think that they just turn up in front of us to irritate us, and it feels very reactive. But back to this notion of the shadow wanting to be integrated. So actually there's a proactive quality to projection. It will actively attract people who can kind of hold that quality on our behalf. That's the only way that we can see it. If we're not prepared to see it in ourselves, we need to attract the people who have that quality that's trying to be integrated so that we can experience it in them. That's why with clients, we might hear people talking about patterns, like, I always seem to, get these similar sorts of people that they find themselves in relationship with. Well, we can get curious then about the projections that might be at play. My bad. I thought I had an extra slide, but I don't. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second so that we can take a little bit of a deeper dive into projections. These gorgeous, scrumptious things that we fling out on other people so that we can bask in how marvellous we are as humans. So the way that we're going to do this is I'm going to invite you to think of somebody who absolutely drives you crazy, somebody so annoying. And I know I'm looking at your gorgeous faces right now, and I'm thinking none of you have ever had a bad thought about anybody in your life. But let's pretend, just for argument's sake, that there's somebody that just drives you mad. Could be, a friend who never gets back to you, or client, potentially. If you're struggling with somebody in your personal sphere, broaden it out. Feel free to throw a politician or a celebrity in there. If you're struggling, I'll give you a trump. Right. If you found somebody who bugs you, top 3 things, and write down they are what? They are so what? Top 3 things that are so ugh about them. When you've got your 3 things, I'm then going to invite you, if you are willing, and Izzy, this is where we'll open the chat, to just put your 3 things in the chat. And then enjoy looking at everybody else's as they pile up. Oh, we're off to a good start. Stubborn, close-minded, petty, narcissistic, selfish. I love this bit. Oh, whiny. That one jumped out. Oh, dear God, I need to take that one. Yes. Oh, bless you, Heather. I feel so bad for this. That's so sweet. Yes, here we are, allowing space for the truth of the fact that we are judgmental and we do project. So have a look at the list of words that are kind of coming up. And what I want you to think about, are they all absolutely 100% the same level of annoying to you? Or do some of them register as more annoying than others? And if anyone feels brave enough to come off chat, I'd love to hear. Yeah, are they all absolutely identically the same in terms of how much they bother you? Perfect, really perfect. We're talking about energy. Some of them bounce, some of them are sharp, and this relationship with self-compassion. And the point with projection, as we've described, is not all of these will necessarily have the same impact on you, because for some of you, some of these qualities won't be in shadow. If they're not in shadow, they're available to you. They're not going to hit with the same charge, and they're not going to be something that you need to project out in order to experience them. For others of us, it's that one for me, it has charge because it has charge in the other, because I can't bear it and I can't allow it in me. So this is the indicator. So these little signals, the discomfort or the slight squirm or this is your Scooby sense. This is your really helpful coaching Scooby sense at play here for the ones that really jump out. Maybe some shadow material that have work for you. So the way to do this, listening out for your Scooby senses as you do it, where you wrote down they are, I'm going to invite you to cross that out and write I am. Go on, I dare you. I am I see squirms. I see a little grimace. I am. Those three words, they're your projections. So let's just try them on. I love watching people's faces at this point. You what? And is it true? Can you find a nub of truth? Not the whole truth. What if we don't try wearing them? Not tonight, not that, not though. What? Absolutely. Hanella, I see you laughing. Great. I'm with you in your own time and when it feels safe and when there's enough self-compassion, actually. And it might be for now, for tonight. No, I take it. For the rest of you, looking for what's that grain of sound truth? Has there ever been a time in my life when even for one moment I was selfish? You know, I was immature, judgmental, a victim, selfish, you know? Can I allow for even 1% of truth? If I'm really struggling to find that, can I imagine that there might be a circumstance in the future when actually I could be arrogant or disorganized, fake? And notice if anything changes. What if anything changes when I invite you to try them on in that way? Let's hear from just a couple on this. Anyone notice any changes? Who have I got? Marina, I think. Are you next? That may have been from before. Irina. Yeah, lovely question. And I would say if it's known and if it fits and something like a values clash is a great example. I know my values and I can see, oh yeah, there's discomfort because there's a value clash. That wouldn't be shadow because it's conscious, it's already known to me. But if it's that, if there's any of that, can't quite put my finger on why does that person wind me up so much? That might be a clue that you're projecting. If you can't quite reach it with logical thought, but I'm a nice person, for example, but it doesn't make sense to me, then that might be a clue that there's some projection and some shadow material. I get wildly curious about everything. Like my dog has opened up projection to me. People, when I'm in the shop, have opened up projection to me. So any level of intensity. And also, I'm going to share an exercise in the follow-up materials I send out because we're also projecting out the very best of ourselves, all the gold in our shadow. So if we think of people that we really admire, people that we put on a pedestal, wow, they're so bold, they're so free. Those projections are also really valuable to chase down as well. So I've got a follow-up thing that helps with those kind of golden shadow projections. So it's not all the dark stuff. And even with the dark stuff, it's really good stuff when you know how to play with it properly. I'm aware of time. I'll take one more on this and then I want to move us on to polarities. So I'm so sorry that we can't get to everybody, but Philippa, I think you were next. Oh, that made my heart smile. Thank you. That was so beautifully expressed. I really loved that. And I think you're right. When we're projecting, it's so reductive. It doesn't have any subtlety or nuance. It gets thrown out in order that we can enjoy how revolting they wear it. When we bring it closer and try it on, what tends to happen is that we get closer to the nuance. I love you when we get into the humanity of it. And actually when we kind of own it and start to integrate it, we can see there's complexity there. There's kind of interrelationship of different qualities and parts actually. And as you say, then we can start to have more compassion for ourselves and compassion for the other. And all of these qualities that get flung out will have a gift in them. But we're going to come on to that when we look at polarities, just to deepen this a little more. This is where I wish we were on the call for 3 hours, not an hour and a half. But shall we move on? Thank you for playing with projections. Let's now move on to our next P, which is polarity. Okay, so polarities, as I say, are just another really kind of easy and accessible way to go hunting for shadow material. You know, projections is this one way that we can see what we're flinging out onto the other. And polarities sit on the kind of the given, if you like, that everything in our world has a polarity, because the world, we understand things through balance. You know, we can't just inhale. We know breathing through inhale and exhale. You know, we know temperature through hot and cold. We can't just have, well, potentially we can. We might have a very evocative presence, but what more becomes available when we dial up our provocative presence? So as coaches, I think there's just a wealth, and this has been transformational for me. You know, if I am only, what am I not? So if I'm living a wonky seesaw, I can get really, really curious if this is above the ground, if this part of the seesaw is kind of visible. Well, it's connected to something else. What's the other end of the spectrum? What might be hiding in my shadow? And the beautiful thing is, it takes an awful lot of energy to say not that. You know, it's like holding a glass of water for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. That glass of water is going to get incredibly heavy. And so it is with parts of ourselves that we're saying, not that, not selfish. I'm not selfish. It takes effort to keep anything at bay. Whereas when we can say yes, we can do that beautiful and increase our range through saying, I am this and that. Then that tension dissolves. And essentially all we've done is increased our range. So as a coach, I may well operate up here. Compassion, warmth, you know, listening, presence. But I wonder what else is available to me if I say yes and extend my range. And when might that come in useful? Yeah. I often think of, you know, as a young woman, you know, I was nice, I was friendly, incredibly amenable. God knows I needed access to and didn't have access to, you know, nasty, mean. It was a loss. So being unkind, being selfish in the right context, in the right situation can be invaluable. So polarities for me is a really creative playground to say, what am I not? And what more could become available to me when I go fishing for the other end of the polarity? Let's do this then together now. So it's back to your pen and paper. And I want you to write down, or inviting you to write down, as a coach, I am. And the top 3 qualities that come to mind. As a coach, I am. And so now we're going to pop you into breakout rooms for about 10 minutes, just small groups. And my invitation to you is to support each other in trying to language the polarity of those qualities that you've just identified. So as a coach, I am X, Y, and Z. These are the qualities I'm happy to identify with. What might the polarity be? Very important, there isn't a right answer. So if your brain thinks that there is or wants to get it right, there isn't a right answer, but there is an answer that will be right for you. So you might dance around. Is it selfish? Is it mean? Is it unkind? You might just do a little kind of dancing around. For some of you, you'll know you find the polarity when you, and it's almost as though your system is going, God, not that, anything but that. If you experience that, that's a clue that you've just landed on some shadow material. I'm happy for you to think anything about me, but not that. That's a clue then that there's some shadow material there. So if you are lucky enough to feel a wince or a cringe, extra points. So explore languaging the polarity, dance around it to find what feels right for you. And then if you have time, my question for you is, and what is the gift in that disowned quality? You have 10 minutes on the clock. Enjoy your conversations, and I look forward to seeing you on the other side. Oh, I saw some laughter, good. Any tears? Not so far. Smiles, excellent. I was lucky enough to do some beautiful work with it, or just listen to somebody doing some beautiful work because I couldn't get in one of the breakouts. And so really enjoyed that process myself. Okay, we're on the home straight. So I'm going to touch very quickly on the final two Ps and then take us to questions at the end if there is time. So you now know how to go polarity hunting. And you're all going to be noticing yourself projecting over the next few days. That's my gift to you. I hope it doesn't drive you too crazy. But now you have those two skill sets available to you. You've got your nouns and your verbs. But as I mentioned, there's these other ways of working with shadow. When we start to kind of acknowledge shadow, recognize it, allow for it even, then one beautiful way to work with shadow is through parts. And really, lots of different ways to language parts. It doesn't really matter. It could be through subpersonalities. You might have a background in IFS. You might be interested in archetypes and the potency of working with archetypes. Or you might be interested in just visualizing a shadow figure and having a relationship with that shadow figure. It's incredibly creative. There's lots of different ways to do this. The key thing is that through this approach, it's the phrase somebody called Barry Michaels, we dignify the shadow with an identity. And I love that. I love that. Our shadow has been left holding all of this stuff. I've been getting on with my life in linear time, in a body, having relationships, showing up in the world. And my unconscious has been left with all of this stuff, a lot of which, as we know, is held in the unconscious with those feelings of shame or humiliation or hurt or rejection. So when we dignify the shadow with an identity, we can come into relationship with it. And how do we do that? Well, we know how to do that. We say hello. We check in. We say, what do you need? Say, I'm sorry I forgot about you. We ask questions. We listen. We tune in. And we write them a letter. We journal. We do free writing. The whole range of ways, once we can kind of conceptualize either these parts. These ones on the screen are all parts that I have a very strong relationship with. I was hanging out with Firecracker today to help me get ready for this talk. She's the one blowing a raspberry. She doesn't give a toss about anything or anyone. And I needed that energy today to get me here in front of you all. So here are some of my parts. And then putting it all together. Really, in all honesty, this should say clusters, but I wanted a P, so it's called patterns, so please forgive me. When you start to language your own shadow through projection and polarities, when you get to know different parts of yourself through subpersonalities or archetype work, what you'll then find is there are different elements that will show up all the time, depending on what it is you're exploring. So if there's a client who's always letting you down at the last minute and you're annoyed, you might map out what's going on in that annoyance. You know, if your partner said they would load the dishwasher and they didn't, and so you start harumphing, or maybe you take on the martyr role and do it yourself. If you break down what's going on in that energetic performance, then you'll start to notice some frequent flyers. For me, my frequent flyers are your victim usually shows up, stupid shows up, really strong critic. And then from identifying those frequent flyers, it gets me ever closer to the kind of the core wounds that are sitting underneath, that are harder to get to. But when I've worked on those core wounds, that's when the real transformation and alleviation has happened for me. And I've been able to welcome in kind of an extraordinary amount of authority actually into my life that just wasn't available to me before. I'll just click to the next screen and then I'll come off slide share. So I've mentioned I'm going to send a couple of things after this talk, including the slides and an exercise to help you with the golden shadow projection. If you're interested in parts work and understanding more about that, there's a free kind of webinar on my website. So if you want to just put your details, you can download that if you're interested in that. I also run deep dive retreats for coaches. And there's dates next spring and autumn. I've got one place left. If you're feeling wildly spontaneous and fancy joining me, I think it's next weekend. There is one spot remaining, and I do have a low cost offer for that place that nobody's taken. So if you're interested, I would love your spontaneity, and if you fancied turning up, just drop me a message and let me know. And we also now share in the chat the link for you to get your certificate of attendance. I have impressed myself no end. I have never, ever, ever got to the end of a talk like this with time to spare for questions. So I'm really delighted. I don't know what happened. You can all take a slice of the credit. Thank you. Thank you for being such a great audience. We have some time. So if anyone is sitting with a question, now's the time. Make it a nice one. Yeah, fun at its heart, it's recognizing it, allowing for it, and then through that allowing, just that melting of the tension, letting it be here. Some things are easier to integrate than others. So the pattern part, if you've got certain qualities or attributes that are going to turn up in a lot of different kind of clusters, it can be much, much harder to integrate them. And that's fine. You just keep doing the work and keep patterning them. When I said at the start, greedy, I'm still struggling with greedy, for example, and it's pointing to a deeper level of work for me around wanting what it is to want. So, so the goal isn't necessarily to kind of, recognize it, allow for it, and integrate it, quickly done, move on. All data is so fascinating. So when I'm struggling to integrate something, it just lets me know that there's more to be done. So I hope that helps. But yeah, it's not so much an active process as an allowing, I'd say, coming into a relationship. And I have iFolgers, the iPhone. Forgive me, I don't know your name. Yeah, beautiful. Absolutely. And, it comes back to that socialization process in this family, in this gender, etc. And, it may be that there's a whole wealth of love and tenderness and sensitivity, that for young boys are kind of cast into the shadows. So, absolutely, it's following your curiosity. That's what I love about this work is we just get to kind of follow the little breadcrumb trails. Um, and use the sensing, as you say, you looked at the polarity exercise. There was I kind of, there's no energy there for those that they may be known to me. Okay. But being drawn to love. If you were happy to tell me, it might not be shadow material. If you were kind of appalled at yourself, that's the clue, the extent to which you'd be willing to say, I went to the supermarket today and I was judgmental. I thought these thoughts. If there's any sort of shame or turning away from, um, then that's a clue. That, and for me, I use that expression, there's a flag in the sand, and I would dig. If you didn't want to tell me, if you're happy to tell me, it probably isn't shadow material. Okay, Marco, super quick question. A huge question to end on, please. And actually, like, this points me to my final comment. If you're left with anything, Marco, just email me or message me on LinkedIn. I would love to hear from you. I'm always happy to follow up with a one-to-one conversation. And genuinely, for anybody, anything emerges or comes up for you over the next couple of days, I love talking about this stuff. So please feel free to reach out to me with those contact details that are on the slides. Thank you so much for your attention, your participation. It's been an absolute joy to spend time with you. So I appreciate you. Thank you very much indeed.